5 years after Vesuvio opened as Vesuvio, City Lights, Lawrence founded City Lights. So that brought in the writers. And of course, bookstore writers, and bookstore.
Welcome to Storied San Francisco, a podcast all about the people and places that make this city unique. I'm your host, Jeff Hunt. That was Janet Clyde, co-owner of Vesuvio Café, one of my favorite SF bars. Janet is our guest on today's podcast. When we met to record at Vesuvio in late October, I was a little early, but Janet showed up right on time. She was immediately confronted by some issue at the place, electrical or lighting, I'm not sure which. As the boss, she had to tend to that. No worries. I settled into the exact booth where, 2 weeks previously, I recorded with Vesuvio bartender Joanne Eliochi, which you'll hear next week. It's also the same spot where, 6 years ago, Rob Vell Smith and I sat down to record the very first episode of this podcast. In this episode, part 1 of 4, you'll meet Janet and hear both the story of Vesuvio the bar and her journey to San Francisco, which dates back to the late 70s. Here's Janet.
Well, you have a lot of choices in San Francisco when it comes to bars. There is a bar for everyone here. Every type of person, every interest, you can find a bar. If you're a Phillies fan, if you're
Correct.
If you're an artist, there's a bar for everyone, and I think that's
if you're old, if
fabulous.
You're young,
That's right.
My wife and I, just before this, had a couple Irish coffees at the Buena Vista. Speaking of, we hadn't been there in a million years, and it's like, we both have Fridays off. We're like, let's go when it's not too crazy.
Buena Vista is one of those places I call, what is it, a touristic spot that locals love.
Correct.
That locals absolutely love.
We have a few of those here. I consider Alcatraz one of those.
Do you love Alcatraz?
It's been a while since I've been there, but I'm like, the 2 or 3 times I've been there have been, I've lived in San Francisco 23 years. I'm pretty much local.
Yeah.
But I love going there. It's really special. My wife is from the Bay Area and has never been.
See, I love Fisherman's Wharf. I am a big fan of Fisherman's Wharf. It was great during the pandemic. It was great before the pandemic. I just like wandering around down there, seeing, things that there's a lot of old San Francisco that still is at Fisherman's Wharf.
I was just saying the other day when I noticed the change in the weather, meaning cold mornings, cold evenings, warm days, I was like, when the weather actually changes in probably November or December, on a cloudy day, we need to go down to Fisherman's Wharf and get a sourdough bowl. Mm-hmm. I'm like, there are still places that serve a legit, delicious, affordable.
Right, old school.
I was just saying that the other day.
Yeah, totally. It's great for families. I think it's great for solo travelers. It's romantic in its way, and I love it. There are old crab boats down there. Mm-hmm. Joe DiMaggio's boat is down there. Mm-hmm. Some of the first, the old skiffs that used to crab. How small are they? Right. They're almost as big as this booth. Like, they are tiny, and they would go out in the fall. It was just
people in them going out and doing this.
And they're very, very small. Right. And that harbor is just, it's so worth seeing.
Yeah.
It's so worth seeing. And there's the Fisherman's Chapel, SCOMA's. Mm-hmm. I just love it. So that's a touristic spot that locals love.
Correct.
Now, Vesuvio, that brings me full circle to Vesuvio, which kind of has always been a little bit of everything for everyone kind of bar. Okay. I think it's been eclectic. I think it's clearly, for many people, their first stop, their first date. Mm-hmm. A lot of firsts happen here.
Yeah.
Their first drink in a bar legally.
Firsts and lasts, or just
first? I'm sure there have been some lasts, but we don't hear about them. We tend to focus on the firsts,
that's great,
and this was the first first bar I stepped into in 1978. So
Holy moly.
I was dropped off right in front of City Lights by a Navy officer. I was hitchhiking up from LA. He picked me up in Monterey, dropped me off there, and said, go in, ask for directions, they'll orient you.
At City Lights?
At City Lights.
Okay.
And so the first bar I walked, after I got oriented at City Lights, it was true, I walked over here, and it was just rolling. The place was full.
78.
In 78.
Okay.
It was absolutely packed. A lot of suits and ties, a lot of different kinds of people.
Yeah.
And I was so blown away that I left and went up to Grand Avenue and didn't come back really until I was hired to work here.
Okay.
So,
wow.
but it was the first bar, and it was always represented to me as the quintessential San Francisco bar. And even though we're not as old as other bars, we have, over the years, come to be known, to be associated with San Francisco for being colorful and whimsical and patronized by so many different people, different kinds of people. For instance, Paul Kantner of the Jefferson Airplane was a big fan and had been coming here. I mean, he was born and raised here.
Right,
so,
right.
He is part of that, generational history of the bar. So, but he among many others.
Yeah.
So we appeal to so many kinds of people that it's pretty fascinating, and we're pretty grateful for that, for being in this intersection of, Chinatown, North Beach, downtown, the Barbary Coast. I mean, we're really smack dab in the middle of what, is the Barbary Coast functionally.
Right.
So, So again, I think Vesuvio, I used to call it the welcome wagon, San Francisco's version of the adult welcome wagon. You could come in.
And there's also the wagon thing.
Bandwagon or on the wagon.
On or off.
We have tea. We have non-alcoholic options if you want to be on the wagon. That's cool. Right. But it's always been super hospitable, which is part of North Beach, really. The character of North Beach is a hospitable.
All are welcome.
Very much part of the Italian heritage of North Beach, part of the seafaring heritage of North Beach.
Artistic too.
Very much.
That's right. That's
very much. It was
on display.
It was Henri Lenoir who bought the bar from Mrs. Mannetti, the Mannetti family. It was a restaurant, a Napolitan restaurant called Vesuvio.
Right here in this location.
Right here in this location. The kitchen was in the back.
Okay.
And
This is the original.
This is the original Vesuvio
business. That was here.
The original. Well, it was a bookstore. It was actually.
Let's go all the way back.
Cavalli Books. It was the first. The first Italian language bookstore on the West Coast.
Okay.
Is I Cavalli, which moved to City Lights space when it turned into the restaurant. They moved to City Lights space, and then they moved up to Columbus Avenue.
Okay.
And if you go it's on Stockton Street, and if you walk in, there are some wonderful photographs of City Lights and Vesuvio as I Cavalli Italian Books.
Do you know when they opened here as a bookstore?
I don't, but I do know that on January 1st, and I forget the year, when Mussolini gave his famous New Year's Day speech.
Okay.
It was a bookstore, and we have a wonderful photograph of men in their overcoats and their fedoras standing out on Columbus Ave, like around to hear.
On the radio, on the wireless.
On the radio, that's right. Listen to Mussolini's
Probably the 30s
speech.
then.
Oh yeah, it was before
30s,
World War II.
I don't want to jump ahead, but you all just celebrated 75 years as a bar?
As a bar.
Got it. Okay.
Because we have not done the research to find out when Mrs. DiMartini turned it in, when it became an Italian restaurant. And there was some contention, well, we didn't buy it. It's like, well, yeah, you did. And Henri actually had a naming contest to change the name. He was like, okay, let's change the name from Vesuvio to, what do you want?
Right.
Call it Henri's, call it Henri Lenoir's, call it Henri Lenoir's Vesuvio. Well, fortunately, Better Sense won out, and they did not change the name. I think it's because maybe Henri didn't have the money to change the name.
The sign and the DBA,
Right, to do all that work. So fortunately for us, the name remained, and fortunately for us, but Henri was a French-Swiss bon vivant.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Bon vivant.
And he's who opened the restaurant or the bar?
He is the one who bought the bar. He bought the business from Mrs. DiMartini.
Who ran the restaurant.
Then it became a bar. And his friends, he was a painter and by love, and so his friends always, he was tending bar at different places. In fact, he had art shows at Specs, and he was hosting art shows at Specs. Had a falling out.
Sure.
But it was very successful, and ended up over here, owning this place as a hang for his artistic friends.
Almost
it was
Shakespearean.
Really, it was
I'll open across the street.
It's very, and it's very normal, right? It's very normal. It's, people work in one bar and decide to open their own bar. And that has happened over the years in San Francisco, all over.
And in other parts of the world. I feel like it's a human thing.
It is. Well, yeah.
That's like Shakespeare. It feels like Shakespeare.
Found your own spot.
Right.
Found your own spot. So
And it's a little bit of... across the street thing.
Human nature. Human nature to
like siblings almost.
Yeah, like
sibling rivalry.
Healthy competition. How you don't
like
it here, you can go right across the street and open your own.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what he did.
Okay, so bookstore, and what was her name that ran the restaurant?
Mrs. Mannetti.
Mrs. Mannetti. Is the kitchen still back there?
No.
Okay.
No,
that's long gone. But then Henri took what was a restaurant, this space, and made it into a bar, roughly like 1948?
Yes, 1948.
Okay.
That's right. 1948.
I did the sobriety test. I was like 75. Well, I just turned 50. That helps. And then I was just like 25 from that.
Right.
48.
So yes, 48. And then he ran it for many years successfully. Very successfully.
As just Vesuvio.
Just as Vesuvio. And so he ran it very successfully from the 40s through the 50s. In the early 60s, with the Vietnam War, things started to change. I'm not the Vietnam War.
It was Korea in the 50s,
the Korean
and then
War.
Vietnam
It was
in the
the
60s.
Korean conflict, the Korean War.
Okay.
And when that started to change, there was a generational change starting to happen as well.
Sure.
And so when that happened, and Henri's friends started to move along, and we moved from the Korean War into the Vietnam and the anti-war, Henri found himself just not feeling it.
Not feeling it, yeah.
Not feeling it. It was just getting more difficult for him, and again, there was a generational shift on.
Yeah.
So he sold it.
Okay.
So he sold it to Ron Fine and a group of investors. Ron quickly bought them out and brought on Leo Rigler to manage the place. And Leo had run the coffee gallery up on Grant Avenue, the very famous coffee gallery. And at that time, the coffee gallery just had beer and wine, and Leo was wildly successful. He was Austrian. He was also a bon vivant, confirmed bachelor, lived down at the International Settlement, the International.
The hotel.
Back in the day when, had just a ball. And so he came in and really made the bar, tightened the bar up, they got a liquor license, brightened it up, made it very, it always had a liquor license. I'm backing up. Leo was successful with beer and wine, and so this place was not doing well because it kind of was not keeping up with the times, and the times were it just was not doing that well. Leo came in and just changed it up.
From Ron.
With Ron.
With
Ron Fine.
Okay.
And Ron also hired an artist, Sean O'Shaughnessy, who's responsible for all of the decorative finishes that you see. Oh. The distinctive look of Vesuvio,
yeah.
which we are always amazed when people say, this is such a beautiful bar. This is such a beautiful bar.
Yeah.
And we are just amazed because it's such an eclectic collection, it's all kinds of art from all kinds of eras. But Sean, whose work is on display right now, his acrylic on paper is on display right now.
Like these?
Right, down.
I'll get pictures.
If you look down on the art in the art display.
Yeah.
So those are representative of the art, some of the art that he did, but all of these decorative finishes that you see on the walls, all the decoupage, all the tile-esque looking work, as well as the main murals down outside, the poem. Sean is responsible for all of that, as well as the tables.
Yeah.
A lot of
tables
this
are part
very
of it.
Intricate decoupage and collage work and brush work. For instance, the table where we're sitting, he modified a brush to do that work.
Wow.
And we can't recreate that.
No.
We cannot find a font. We cannot do
it's
this
not
digitally.
only the hand aspect, it's the implements that he used also.
Yes, it's the modifications of his brush.
Right.
And he spent time, I believe, in Japan, where he was very...
I see it. I see the Japanese influence.
He was influenced by Japan. He was influenced by alien visitation.
Okay.
He did believe that he had seen some things that were otherworldly. He did have very strong images. And so if you look through the bar and you look outside on our murals, you'll see some of that representation. Sean was born in LA, and we love him. So
can I ask quickly, but because I'm afraid I would forget, but the itching to get away from Portland, Oregon.
That was Sean's idea.
And then
it came from a postcard, actually.
Well, I noticed in an old photo downstairs of the place, of the alley, that it looks like there's a different version of that same thing.
It was recreated.
It didn't end with Portland, Oregon. Maybe it was like itching to get away from something. Somewhere, maybe Portland?
I've never seen that. I've always seen it, we are itching to get away from Portland, Oregon, because it came from an old postcard.
Is that all you know about? Because I'm like, what the heck?
Well, exactly. Well,
I love
surrealism.
it, but I'm like,
remember, surrealism was a movement then, and this is part of the surrealistic movement.
I'm itching to get away from Portland,
Oregon. Like, it's just, what does that mean? It means we think it's a flea infestation back at the turn of the century. We believe that it's kind of like a jibe at the Portlanders.
Sure.
I mean, San Franciscans are known to be a little just a little arrogant about our wonderful weather and culture.
Yeah, and it's almost like you're not allowed to say like, oh, I went to Portland and I liked it.
And I had a really good time.
It's a quite charming little place.
Yeah.
It's not San Francisco.
I wouldn't say we're completely chauvinist, but we're a little chauvinistic.
A little, full of ourselves.
I do like it, though. And we just had it recreated because we couldn't really restore it. It was coming off the tin underlay. And so we hired a scene painter from the Scene Painters Union, actually. And he
for the itching to get away.
Yeah, and we had him do the current version, and it was really gratifying because once we put it up, people stop and they just really want to know about it. It's an
attention getter.
It totally is. And
are you familiar with Dr. Bob in New Orleans?
No.
He does the Be Nice or Leave. You've probably seen that. It's in New Orleans. They're all over all the bars.
Yes.
In New Orleans. I just spent about a year ago. I spent 3 weeks there, and where I was staying was really close to Dr. Bob's little art studio factory. Like, they just pump out.
Oh, wow.
The current version of the Itching to Get Away reminds me of that aesthetic.
Oh, I'd love to get one.
Oh, you should. Just look at Dr. Bob. Dr. Bob.
Yeah, somebody needs to bring me one from.
I'll do it.
Oh, Definitely, bring me one. We'll put it
It gives
up.
me incentive to go to New Orleans.
Because we've got Beware of Pickpockets and Loose
Loose
Women,
Women.
and that came from New Orleans. So yeah, we
Yes,
love
it did.
we love when people show up with things. And so over the years, we've tried to both maintain the original finishes and look of Vesuvio, but also
That
add
Shaughnessy
that Shaughnessy
created.
Yes, and he
Okay.
also worked at other restaurants. There other restaurants and other bars around. I believe some of his work is at Red's Java House.
Oh, yeah. That makes sense.
Today, but it's definitely not as in good a condition. But we've added to our collection over the years,
Sure.
and we do get new work, and I'm really proud of that. You know, I'm really proud of the people who are interested in the beat movement, but in art in general. So
You just said the beat movement, and I was wondering, you know, the timeline. You I think the way you phrased it was like with the Korean conflict, and especially moving then into the 60s and Vietnam, and the times are changing. To your knowledge, like when did the bookstore here become City Lights, and like how,
1954.
54.
54. So 5
a little younger
years,
than Vesuvio.
Yeah, well, 5 years after Vesuvio opened as Vesuvio, City Lights, Lawrence founded City Lights.
Okay.
So that brought in the writers.
Got it.
And of course,